all these distinguished women who have been so involved in politics and community activism. As a matter of fact, Mary Kay probably doesn't remember, but she helped to usher me through my first Democratic convention when I ran for the state board, and I won't say how many years ago because you already know anyway if you looked at the bio. But I am happy to be here, and I'm not born in Lansing, in this area, but I was born in Detroit and raised in Detroit. And of course, Detroit is full of politics all the time. And I remember that I was always an advocate for something. It almost didn't matter what it was, but I was always advocating for something. I remember as early as elementary school when a friend of mine was dying of leukemia. His name was John Webster. His brother, George Webster, became an outstanding football player at Michigan State. But we used to read together in the library, 5th grade and 4th grade at Wingard Elementary School. And all of a sudden he wasn't coming to school anymore, and I wanted to read with him. So I kept arguing, well, why isn't John here? Well, he's sick and he can't come to school. Well, just because he's sick, I kept saying he should still be able to come to school. I didn't recognize that cancer was something very, very serious, and he did have cancer. But I argued and argued and argued, and he never came back to school, but at least I got my point across. And learned that there's some battles that you die on and some battlefields you don't, but you also learn a lesson from them all. When I left elementary school, of course, I went through high school and came to Michigan State. Michigan State was go green. But it was a rude awakening because I was the only African American in my dorm at Michigan State. In those days, it was very, very segregated, and they tried to spread us all around. I did have a roommate, but when she saw who I was, she decided she didn't want to room with me, and I didn't meet her until later. She was down the hall. My roommate that they gave me, his father died the first semester, so she had to go home, and I was alone as the only African American at Michigan State. But I soon found that in my life, as I've traversed these years, that it's not the only time that I would ever be the only African American in a room, because that's happened throughout my whole lifetime. While on campus, Ernie Green and I were very good friends. Ernie would have to, most of you remember Ernest Green of the Little Rock Nine. Well, his mother would send him to Detroit in the summers to keep him safe. My best friend was his cousin, so we got to know each other very well. And we went to Michigan State at the same time, and we organized NAACP there. And we did probably one of the very first voter registration drives at Michigan State. We just went from dorm to dorm and party to party and registered people wherever they were and said, this is Ernie, you know what he's gone through in Little Rock. You've got to get out there and vote. And I don't know how many we actually registered, but I think most of those whom we did recognized the importance of voting. We also did a picket of Woolworths. Remember in the days when there was a lot of picketing going on. Ernie and I led the picket, and I found my picture, believe it or not, on the MSU archives all the way back to 1959, I think it was, picketing in front of Woolworths. I was surprised. But one of the reasons that I wanted to do that was my thrust into understanding something about national politics. I was the second vice president as an undergraduate of my sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and went to Florida for a regional convention right after the death of John F. Kennedy. Well, everybody thought that since Kennedy had died and Lyndon Johnson was from Texas, every change that had taken place, open accommodations and all the changes were going to go back to the way that they were before. And hotels were going to be closed to us again, and we weren't going to be able to go to restaurants, etc. So when I got to Florida, they had canceled all of the hotel registrations at all the hotels. I think this was in Pensacola. And we had to stay in the black high school gymnasium. There was only one black motel in town, which held about 10 people or 12 people. Being an officer, I was able to live at one of the sorority sisters' houses during that time, but everything had closed. But we found out later that Johnson was not going to allow that to stand. But that was my foray into understanding the importance of national politics and how national politics impacted my life throughout. So let me go into how I became involved in Michigan politics before Rachel hits me on the shoulder because I'm talking too long. It seems as if things kind of converged in 1972. By this time, I had become a staff person with the Michigan Education Association, the only woman staff person as an executive director for MEA at that time in the area, and the only African American to be an executive director for MEA. That was the Lansing Schools Education Association. Some of you may know teachers. They all belong to this organization that I refused to join before 1970 because they didn't hire African Americans at that time. So we established a whole division as a political group, and I was hired by them in 1971. At that time, in 1972, I had a TV show on Channel 6 called Challenge. And I had community forums. Some of you may remember them. I had Shirley Chisholm and Alex Haley and Sam Proctor and a lot of people who came, mainly because there was a lot of disruption in the communities in Lansing at that time. And I felt, well, maybe I could have an ability to try to bring people together. So I had these community forums, and I invited Shirley Chisholm. I didn't think she would come, but she came in 1972 as a candidate for president. And I was so impressed. When she talked about being unbossed and unbought, she was unbossed and unbought. And I said, I'm going to be like her. I'm already unbossed and unbought, but I'm going to be more unbossed and more unbossed so I can be like her. So I met Joe Finkbinder around that time because I had her come as a member, as a guest of LSEA. But I'm not so sure that LSEA was really ready for her. So I asked Joe Finkbinder. I found out who the president of the Ingham County Democratic Party was, and UAW local at that time. And I said, Joe, you don't really know me, but my name is Barbara, and I have Shirley Chisholm coming. Can you help me pay for a reception, or better yet, can you have the party pay for a reception for her? And he said, sure. And so Ingham County Democratic Party, thank you, paid for a reception for Shirley Chisholm in 1972. Well, at the same time, I had organized the paraprofessionals for the Lansing School District. We had to fight the Federation out of Detroit who wanted to organize them, but we won. But organizing them and bargaining the first contract, I said, wow, they don't have very many benefits. What is the matter with people that they don't want to pay paraprofessionals who do such a wonderful job in our classrooms? I need to know how I can do better. I did organize the contract or negotiate the contract, but it wasn't enough. So I talked to Joe Finkbinder about that just on the side, and he said, well, Barbara, you need to find out where the rules come from for paraprofessionals. And I said, oh yeah, there must be rules. And he said, well, you know, I think it's the State Board of Education. And he said, you need to run for the State Board of Education. Okay. And I said, okay, Joe, but what is the State Board of Education? And he told me, you know, this is the body that deals with education at the state level, and they make rules and they do all these things. And I said, oh, that sounds like just what I want to do. And then I said, but how do I do that? And he said, well, you have to run through either the Democratic Party or Republican Party, he said, at a state convention and get nominated. And I said, oh, that sounds good. When do they meet? Like, they're going to meet tomorrow, you know, so I can go and get nominated. So he told me all about how to run for a position at the state level and how to run for the Democratic Party, through the Democratic Party. And he also introduced me to people because I had to find out, well, you just don't go to the party, as Mary Kay knows. You just don't go down to the party and say, I want to run. You have to know people, like at that time, Marcellius Ivory, who was the vice president of UAW, Tom Turner, who was secretary treasurer of AFL-CIO, Sam Fishman, who was president of UAW, Doug Frazier. You have to get to know all of these people. And once they get to know you, it's really them getting to know you more than you getting to know them, then you have to run statewide. You can't just go up and down the street that you live on and Lansing. You have to get to know people statewide. So that's what I did. I got to know the process and learned that knowing the process to do something in politics is extremely important. How do you run a campaign at the state level? And I found that it's one thing to get to know all the people in Detroit and Grand Rapids because they're large areas, but if they're going to know me and vote for me at the convention, I had to go to Thomas and Bay City and all these small towns. And what I also found out was that I went to all these small towns, as many as I could get to, but most other candidates didn't go to those towns. So when we came to the convention, people in little cities were running around Grand Rapids, Amway Grand Plaza singing, Barbie, Barbie, because they had gotten to know me. Of course, that was also late at night and they had Barbie and all those other things. But so then I did run for the State Board of Education and I did win the election, and I served for 24 years on the state board. One of the best experiences I could ever have had, because I learned that it's not just establishing rules in terms of reading, writing, and arithmetic, but it's also getting to know the migrant community, the Native American community, and all the different communities and the different levels. And it was also getting to know internationally about education. Well, I have a lot of firsts that I could tell you about, but I'm going to be here all night if I do that. So I'll let you ask me some questions later, because I'd love to have questions about my international activities related to education and politics, and Geraldine Ferraro, because it was the most exciting experience of my life being on Geraldine Ferraro's campaign and during the nomination speech for her. But I won't mention all those things now because Rachel's going to get me. Thank you.
And all this is Joe's fault.
It's all Joe Finkbeiner fault and the fault of all of you who are part of the Ingham County Democratic Party.
You use the microphone, we can't hear you if you don't use the microphone. So when you give a comment, there's a microphone in front of you to grab, so make sure you're here. Yeah, there's another one by Eleanor as well.
You're fine.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, I'm Eleanor Holbrook. I don't know if I can you hear me? Okay. I don't know if I can top these stories, but it reminds me of all of the rich experiences that I have had in my life because of these wonderful women and because of all the associations of the Democratic Party and the Ingham County Democratic Party. I want to thank all of you for inviting us to be here and talk about our stories. So I was told I was supposed to have stories. I got a lot of stories, so we could be here a long time. But I want to thank my fabulous family. My son is here from Boston, which makes me feel very good that he would be here, because my family put up with an awful lot during all those years of running out the door to go to meetings and so on. So I also brought along a lot of photos. It made me do a deep dive into all these boxes that I have. So you'll see Debbie Stabenow with her first campaign in my living room. I'm very proud of the fact that campaigns originated in my living room many times. So, and Gretchen Whitmer, a photo of her with her first campaign. And I'm hearing these wonderful names like Joe Finkbeiner, for instance, and talking about the 18-year-old vote, which absolutely turned everything upside down. This is really just an incredible thing that happened. In fact, it swept in. I remember well in East Lansing, Colburn, Griffiths, and Will. Yep. Do you remember that? And then George Griffiths went on to become the mayor of East Lansing, and then the drain commissioner, and so on. So anyway, I want to tell you just a couple of funny stories, I think. And that is, after this big win that we had, Dave Hollister was the chair of the party, and he became a county commissioner along with Debbie Stabenow and Richard Conlon and Joanne Trezise, and it was just a real sweep of the Board of Commissioners also. And so we had this meeting in his living room, Sherry and Joe Fickbeiner on Forest Street in East Lansing. And Dave, you know, he was like, oh my God, we got all these openings here and there. And he was pointing out people, do you want to do this, do you want to do that? And my background is that I'm a registered nurse, but primarily a real estate broker. That's what I've done for like 40 years with a few breaks here and there. A few breaks to work for labor, for instance, for Sam Fishman. That's another story. But anyway, so Dave Honesty pointed at me and he said, you're a nurse, right? Okay, you want to be on the Board of Health? Sure, what's that? Okay, we'll do that. So that was interesting because the Board of Health was sued almost immediately. So I'll tell you that story in a minute, because that was a very important part of my life. But I want to tell you just two lessons that I really learned in all of these experiences that I've been privy to and I've been pulled into, and so on. And one is the importance of boots on the ground. And I'm going to do a shout out for Blue Brigade because that's what Blue Brigade does. Boots on the ground. Just absolutely essential. And so one little story here is that I had two little children at home. We lived on Melrose in a rented house. And the lady across the street came over and said, how would you like to be a poll watcher? I didn't know what that was. It was JFK. I said, of course, JFK, my God. You know, who wouldn't want to do that? So here's this precinct delegate comes over to my house, knocks on the door, and asks me if I want to be a poll watcher. That is the grassroots involvement that really makes a difference. So the other important thing that I really have taken away from this is the importance of electing Democrats from the bottom to the top. And I learned this, a big lesson here when the Board of Health got sued. It was a very important suit. There's some indication and information that I got in all the stuff I left over on the side there you can take a look at. Very big suit. What happened was that we had just all gotten there, a bunch of Democrats, so you know, we're eager to do the right thing. And the director of the health department came in and said that we have a practice in our women's clinic to give young women birth control pills when they come in, and I want it stopped. So the director of the clinic came in and said, there are reasons why we're doing this. These are young women who are abused, and gave us this incredible stories about why they would sit down with a young woman and try to help them, because obviously their life was not going to be a very good one with what was happening. And we as a board looked at each other. We were brand new, and we said, we want to continue this. This is an important public health action that we need to do to protect young women. And we were promptly sued. And we were sued in our local circuit court, which came down with a ruling that said, these girls are chattel. They're like furniture. I'm a realtor, so I can tell you chattel is a word that's used for furniture. It belongs to you. You can do anything that you want with it. You don't need to go to your parents. You know, your parents own you, and we said, in an emergency, if you're being abused, this should not happen. The parents should not have total control over the young woman's life. This is a big deal at that time. This was 1974. It went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. And I want to tell you, that taught me that we needed Democrats everywhere to support us at every single level, or we would not have been able to do that. And a Supreme Court that ruled in our favor. There was a huge amount of money poured into it. You can just imagine. The Mormon Church had had a very interesting brief that you might want to read about chattel and how women belong to their husbands and the whole thing. Very interesting read. Just recently, I called the Michigan Archives and asked if they would like all my briefs. I go like this, and they said yes. So they have it. They have them now, and they're in a safe place. Anybody can read them, if they want to. But that really taught me you have to be able to turn to people in here when something like this happens, who will be sympathetic, who will be able to give you money. The ACLU was involved here at Pilpel. Their chief counsel wrote a brief on our behalf. This was an important case. So that was an experience I hadn't expected at all. A couple more stories. I got lots of
Ellen,
stories.
if we move for the introductions, we'll get your stories in.
Yes, okay, you can all ask me.
Okay, one more question.
Stories. Okay, because they are good. All right.
Okay. Well, actually,
Well, yeah, Diane Holman. I also realized what a big long splatter of stories I had when I was like thinking of what I was going to say here, looking forward to it. But so what I thought, I have one thing I want to concentrate on, but just overview is, I grew up in a Republican family in a really Republican part of Detroit, or not Detroit, outside of Detroit. I don't even want to say the name of it. Anyway, and then I just wasn't even interested in politics at all, and there was nothing about it that I thought looked interesting until after I graduated from college. I started out as a teacher, and I got a job at the American School in Aberdeen, Scotland. And there were other American teachers there, and they are all like young liberal Democrats, and I never heard all that before. And then I thought, that's where I got really interested in the Democratic Party, was living in Scotland. So then when I came back, I actually kind of switched careers then, and I went into engineering, and I did another degree in engineering and did all that, but then also I got married, and my husband and I, Chris Berglund, and he was a professor at MSU. We got married, and we bought, we got a house, and we were looking, and he grew up on a corn farm, so he couldn't have houses around him. He didn't like that, So we went to Meridian Township and got a house because I like trees, and he didn't want any houses nearby, so we found the rural road there. So here we are in Meridian Township, and we wanted, somehow, I don't know why, but maybe from what I learned, being around the teachers, the other Democratic teachers I met in Scotland, I wanted to be involved with Democrats. And so we were asking in Meridian, so this is in early 80s or mid 80s, and we were asking in Meridian Township, if you know Meridian Township, you probably all do, like the history there, but we said, how can we, where are the Democrats here? We want, some Democrats that we want to, we'd say, people would laugh, there's no Democrats here. And it was a big, Meridian was so Republican. And but then somebody said, oh, you need to find Winifred Motherwell. So because Winnie was out there, and there was just this small group, and that's how we got involved, and then we started working on the township board campaign, and that was back when there was a really strong slow growth movement there and anti-development, if you remember all that in Meridian. But that was the message of that. We had our candidates for the board. There had never been a Democratic board, or even there had been a few isolated Democrats that kind of got in by accident. I could think that there was an opening, and no contest or something, but previously. But so for this, this small group, we worked really hard to get that first Democratic board in Meridian, and the way we were able to do it was to really focus on the whole slow growth movement, and we had a really strong message, and it was very Is this not working well?
Oh, no, you're fine. Sorry, the cord is stretching. I didn't see that Maria had a microphone in front of her,
Oh,
so.
yeah, right, okay.
My bad.
Well, so that's what I just wanted, the Meridian thing and having the strong message, it allowed us to, I think having to grab onto a strong message, even though it's a area that's really, you would think would never ever go for Democrats or another party, and they, and it's been, ever since then, it's Democratic now. I mean, it kind of slowly got more and more and more, and I think that was one message I wanted to leave today, is because this is a time period where, I mean, it's always some, but it's really important. This is a year to flip things in the United States.
Yeah.
And I look back at Meridian and I think we really got out there at doors. It's by being familiar. We're not strangers. We're not, weirdos out there where, we have a good message. So we had a good message to bring, and there's a lot of good messages we can bring, now compared to what's going on out there. So it's, time there, but I think also then along with it, it's like you have to run two tracks. You have to be always doing your party plans for current with a good message, but then you have to run a parallel path that's always looking forward, bringing people in all the time too. You can't stop ever trying to bring people in. So that's when anyway, after that I went on to, I was on the Township Park Commission. My husband Chris was on the, not Chris Holman, Chris Berglund. He was a township trustee back then, but I went on to work. I was on the county commissioner, but always through there, what happened in Meridian stayed with me, and also as a officer of Ingham County Democrats, I've always wanted to. I see Meridian Township a parallel to what's going on now, like in the country with the rural areas, and I think the Democrats cannot leave those rural areas unattended to. We have to get out there, even if we're not right away present there or feel welcome or even anything. I think we have to keep working on that. And so with Ingham Dems, and Ingham County has a large rural area, I've tried to, since when I was on the county or with working, I still work with Ingham County Dems, like Meridian Township, Ingham County is, we have to get that presence out there in the rural areas, even though it looks, they're still electing Republicans here and there, but we have to keep the long term going on that, because you have to be familiar. And I worked on yard signs last time in the rural areas because I felt that same thing that I got from Meridian. You have to just be out there. People have to know that they might have a Democratic neighbor. They don't take for granted it's a Republican here. And so I'm big fan of us maintaining a presence and getting a presence in the areas that aren't obvious that they're there. So I guess that's what I want to bring after all of this.
Thank you.
I'm all set.
You're all set?
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, everybody. This is wonderful. I don't know why I picked this last seat, probably because I knew these wonderful ladies have done amazing things. And so it's not intimidating, but it helps me and educate more. My name is Maria Vancourt, but everybody knows me as Maria Starr. I had that name for 38 years before I married my husband. And Mike Green, who was the president of Local 652, I'm a retiree from GM. And so that's my local. And Mike Green says, Maria, you're Maria Starr. no matter what, you're still gonna be our star. And I said, that's fine, it's legal, because I put it hyphenated, you know, it's great. Even my pharmacist told me that he kept calling Maria Vancourt, and I wouldn't move. And he barely said Maria Star, and I jumped. And I looked at him, I go, that name has a melody, doesn't it? He goes, oh yeah, I like it a lot better. And I said, me too. Everybody knows me as Maria Star, so I just continue saying that. And my husband even told me, you don't have to change your name. I said, I'm sure I'm gonna be married to you and have my ex-husband's name. And then I said, besides, when we went to go see we always decorate his parents' graves, and his mom did not change her name. So when I see that marker and her husband's next to her and she has, I go, God, that doesn't feel united, you know. So I said that's another reason why I adopted his name, Vancourt. So, but as for me, I came from Corpus Christi, Texas. My mom brought us up here when I was 15 years old after Hurricane Celia. Hurricane Celia destroyed our home. My brother Julio Cesar Guerrero was living here, and he's like a journalist. He used to write at articles at the El Renacimiento, the newspaper here, the Latino newspaper here at the time. I went to Harry Hill, and it was nice. And my mom picks me up, and then she goes, I didn't know there was a lot of Mexicans here. And I go, yeah, she's Puerto Rican, Cuban, and I'm going like that. 2 weeks later, we moved, and I ended up going to Waverly High School. And it was only me, and then a lady, Marta Bobillo. She was Cuban. She just came from Florida, Cuba. So she was going to a different school to learn a second language. And a young black man named Leon, I can't remember his last name. We were the only three. Everybody else was Caucasian there. Didn't really get friendly. The kids there, they had their own buddies. And there was a young girl that came from Texas, from Dallas. So we were the new students there. And we grew together, and we're still friends today, 50 years later. And she's a bilingual teacher in California. She just retired. But I used to say, I hate politics. I hated it. And I remember as a kid, I would watch the news, and my mom would come home from work, and she would yell, shut that off. Don't be watching that. And I never understood why she did not want me to watch the news. And I believe a lot of it because she didn't want me to, she was keeping me, sheltered. So when I unexpectedly joined LACLA, Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, Rudy Reyes and Ray Zamora, may he rest in peace, called me, told me to come to the meeting. And I said, no. I said, I'm busy. I'm doing my housework. And then Ray says, Maria, we're going to tell the people that are waiting for you. And I said, you better not. He goes, no, I'm telling them you better be here because, and all I thought about, all those people are sitting there and they're going to wait for me to show up. So I quickly took a shower and I went and I walked with an attitude. I had a bad attitude, and I sat there and I gave them a dirty look. And they were telling us about what LACLA was all about. And I said, okay. So after they did their spiel, I said, okay, goodbye. I got up and started walking away. And then Ray says, Maria, give me your $20. What? And he says, give me your $20. So I gave him the $20. I gotta go, so I left. And so when I hop in the car, I'm going like, what did I just do? And I said, oh well. A week later, he calls me up and he says, we're gonna have another meeting. And I said, no, don't even call me. He goes, no, we want you there. You need to be there. And I just like, oh, all right. So I went. Rudy looks at me, gives me a checkbook, and he goes, will you balance this check? He goes, you know how to balance a checkbook? And I said, well, yeah, I'm head of household. He says, well, will you balance this book? And I gave him a funny look like, why can't you do it? He goes, do it. So I did. So when I was done, I said, here's a checkbook. No, hold on to it. And I'm going like, why? He goes, hold on to it, Next thing you know, I was treasurer for 8 years. I did not know. So the whole time, so when we first did the Get Out the Vote, Roberta Cannon, she was in the APR, now she's our president. She's a wonderful lady. She helped me out and she taught me how the numbers, how we put the stipends and how we keep track and all that. So she was wonderful in helping me that. And then I said, what are we doing? And she says, oh, we're sending the kids out to pass literature. I go, literature of what? And she gives it to me and she shows me. And I looked at it and I said, I hate politics. And then she goes, well, you're involved now. So then from that day on, I started learning more and more. And then Veronica Johnson grabs me and she goes, you got to join the Dems party. I go, I do? She goes, yes, come on. So she's the one that brought me in to join the Democratic Party, because I would have never thought. My mom and my dad, my mom had a 4th grade education, my dad had a 6th grade education, and I know my mom didn't vote, because I will ask my mom, did you vote? She goes, no, only people that own homes vote, she says. And I looked, and I said, okay. And my dad, I never asked my dad, you know, so then I would stay up every election, who's gonna be our new president. I would stay up and watch all of that. So when they said, like Michigan, they said, oh, we have 100 or 100,000 people who voted, and I looked and they showed like a dozen people at the convention jumping with joy, and I go, they just lied. There's only 12 people there, you know? So the whole time that they were getting the numbers, I did not know it was from the state. I thought it was just the people who were there at the convention. I learned so much being involved with LACLA, A. Philip Randolph Institute, and then the women's issue with CLUE. I've learned a lot. I was a member of, I need to renew my dues, at NAACP and Pride at Work. I mean, if it wasn't for the UAW inviting me to become member of the Civil and Human Rights Committee and the Women's Committee, I would have never known what I know today, what I've learned so much. My brother encouraged me to go to the University of Michigan Labor Studies. They always have these conferences every year. And I started with the Latino Workers Leadership Institute. That's when I learned the backbone of a union, because I had no idea what a union. I'm the only person, we're 11 in the family, and I'm the only person that was involved with the union. Got to learn what the union was all about. And so as of today, even this week, I'll be heading to the University of Michigan to do a presentation with 2 others, Megan, with Mary Kay's daughter, and another lady named Carrie Barnett. She's from AFT. We're gonna do a presentation on leadership of women, women's leadership. So it's gonna be exciting, but I'm still learning every day. I still go out. I'll never forget when Carol Wood and Jody Washington asked me to sign up to run for city council. I took a deep breath and I looked at him and I said, oh, I am so flattered, but no, I don't have a thick skin. I don't want people getting mad at me. No thanks, you know. So we can keep on. I can tell you more stories, but thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate all of you.
Thank you.